Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
As I recall, Julian Huxley, the great biologist, at one point said that if spirits exist, why do they always put forth such drivel? Back in the early 19th century, the days of the great mediums, it seemed as if a lot of the spirit communications were very unimportant, nonsensical, not profound at all. And
yeah, that's really true, and you find the same thing with channels. Some of them are very profound, very thoughtful, and important kinds of messages. Others are mediocre, and some you wouldn't take the time of day from. They're just not that significant.
You know, one of the great spirit mediums was Eileen Garrett, who founded the Parapsychology Foundation, and they did some incredible studies with her in which they measured her brain waves while she was channeling her spirit guide and otherwise, and they noticed a completely different pattern.
Yeah, each one, she had 4 spirit controls, which we would call communicators or beings now. And each one of these had a different personality pattern, and her own brainwave pattern was different for each one. Now, did you know that Ira Progoff interviewed her in a very deep way and then interviewed each of her spirit guides?
No, I'm not aware of that.
And what he would do would be to get into conversations with them. And Progoff is a very
A psychoanalyst.
A Jungian-oriented analyst. And what he found was that as he got deeper and deeper, he got just pulled into a very deep conversation with one of her guides, which was sort of a Ramtha guide, and another one which was sort of a spirit of wisdom.
Now, when you say sort of a Ramtha guide, what does that mean?
Well, he announced himself as Rama. He said he was the spirit of wisdom, I guess it was. And so he represented creativity and wisdom and so on. And then she had another one who represented logos, the ideas and concepts. Now, what Progoff concluded was that these were not separate entities, but they were a very deep part of Eileen Garrett connecting with an archetypal energy and then being personified, much like you might create a personality out of your car and it might mentally sort of speak to you. But in this case, it was a personality being created.
Now, an archetypal energy in this sense, what does that mean?
Well, Progoff has the idea that there are forces or energies that represent or reflect our accumulated wisdom or our idealized idea of compassion or of healing. Now, in kind of a non-physical space, similar to Jung's collective unconscious.
Almost like mythological figures.
Yeah, that'd be a good comparison. And but they're not imaginary. They have some reality, if only in our own imaginary construction of them. So he felt that Eileen Garrett was tapping into those very mythological, archetypal forms and giving them a name and a voice when she was in the trance
In other
state.
words, you might say at one level there's the depths within each of us, which is just extraordinary. Probably we all have more potential than we realize, and that goes very deep. And then that touches something else which really transcends the personal.
That's
aspect.
exactly the idea. That's exactly. And I think that's one of the major ways of looking at the experience of channeling and how people are able to tap these kinds of sources.
Well, you know, another research finding that has intrigued me is the work being done now in multiple personalities, where an individual who's considered highly neurotic has different personalities, usually not very enlightened. They also show these same distinct brainwave patterns when the different personalities are coming through. Do you think there's a relationship there?
It could very well be that some of the people who present themselves as channels are actually in a kind of a form of a benign or a non-neurotic multiple personality, as though the channel part is a sub-personality of them, maybe embodying a greater wisdom or understanding than they might have in their own conscious self, but it still could be a part of them. Now, some of the research on multiple personality shows that even with people who are seriously disturbed, there is often one of their personalities that is a positive, constructive, wise helper.
Yes.
And if you can evoke that part of the person, then that part may help the other disturbed parts get together and heal.
Is there a danger for people who might want to become involved in all of this channeling, as so many people are now? Are there any studies that suggest that the spirit mediums are less healthy or don't live as long or have certain problems?
They talk to themselves. Well, I'm kidding. There are several problems. One is, if people are interested in doing channeling, my suggestion is don't do it. Because anytime you are changing your conscious level of awareness, you are in a sense opening a door, and the door might be open to parts of yourself that you don't like. It might be open to spirits, if that's what's going on, that might be dangerous. A Ouija board is sort of like opening your door on a dark night. You don't know who might come in. So that's one thing. Now, a second thing is that you can be possessed by your enthusiasm for channeling. I know of some people who channeled, who were doing channeling, still are doing channeling, who get totally fixated and caught up. They are listening to their other voice. They are listening to the voice of the channel. They can't wait to get back to it, like some people get addicted to computers, some people get addicted to chocolate, some people get addicted to being channels.
And many of these trance mediums have followers who seem to be addicted. I mean, like Lazarus is a very popular one, and claims never to have been in a physical body, and yet many people who are in physical bodies come to him for advice, as if he should know.
Yes, good point. Some channels give advice, and people follow it religiously. Some charge high amounts for their workshops.
Encourage their followers to invest in various business projects that may be profitable to the medium.
I know one lady who, I was a group of us who have been working a little bit in this area, and I know one lady who said she apologized only for having been channeling for 9 months, and she sort of looked very, very sorry and said, I don't even have a business card yet. So you have a new job opportunity.
It's a growth industry.
A growth industry, yes. Labor-intensive growth industry. But there is that. And one channel is giving out information that there are going to be earthquakes and natural disasters, and people are moving, selling their property, selling their goods, moving to the Northwest or some other part of the country. And
I mean, there was quite a rage back in 1969 when Edgar Casey, a well-known channel, had predicted, or people assumed he had predicted, that California was going to fall into the ocean. And
yes.
I know people who invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in rescue equipment.
Oh, really? And did it fall? It didn't.
No.
Well,
how do we evaluate this kind of material, Arthur? Some of it seems very sublime. There, certainly from the point of view of parapsychologists, some of the material coming through, one would say, is psychic. It is accurate extrasensory information, and yet quite a bit of it seems to be the product of a fantasy or a delusion or a mixture of these things.
Yeah, you have to really use your judgment and not take everything as the word of authority. It's very easy to believe for many people that if somebody's on the other side, then they must know everything. Well, I remember a statement made by transpersonal psychologist Charlie Tart, who said, dying does not raise your IQ. And what that means is, just because somebody is on the other side and says they're on the seventh plane, or that they're the spirit of your great Uncle George or the spirit of Einstein, doesn't mean that they have any more perspective, any higher knowledge than they might have had here. There are people here who think they know a lot, and you wouldn't take their advice on a bet. The same thing is true of some channels. So you needn't give over your emotional authority to somebody speaking just because they're saying things that sound good and they're presumably from the great beyond. And I think that's true not only on Earth, but with channels who are bringing information through from outside their consciousness. It's very impressive when they say something psychic, like, I see you living in a house that has 2 stories and there's a picket fence around it, and you had a little dog named Spotty or Alphonse when you were a child.
That tends to get to people.
That's right. And so they think, well, gee, they must know all about me and they can tell me what to do. Not necessarily true.